I still remember the night like it was carved into glass. The rooftop was glowing with string lights. The kind you see in catalogs where everything looks too perfect to be real. I had lined up crystal glasses on a table by the railing, still carrying the store tags, waiting for someone in my family to notice I had built something of my own. But they never showed. Instead, my phone lit up with a call from my sister. Or so I thought. When I answered, it was my father's voice booming. Hard and cold. Half of your 11 million penthouse is ours. You are only parking it under your name. Sign the papers. I froze. My hand on the folder that held the deed. The notary stamp was pressed in dark ink on the last page. Proof that this space in the clouds belonged to me alone. For a moment, the city stretched below. Silent. Above me. The lights hummed. Steady and indifferent. That was the shock. But the truth is, the loneliness had started hours before. When no one came through the lobby. No familiar voices echoed in the hallway. And no chair scraped against the rooftop floor. I had cooked too much food. Filled too many plates. I thought I was preparing for family. But I was really setting a table for ghosts. Still, they pretended. My sister posted videos from a glossy showroom downtown. A red car bow-tied for the cameras. As if that spectacle erased the rooftop I had worked years to reach. My mother sent a text with a heart. Followed by silence. Their laughter in the video rang louder than the quiet hum of my own refrigerator inside. They call this family. I call it a transaction dressed as love. When the phone rang again, my father's command cut through the night air. This is not your private victory. It is family property. Stop pretending otherwise. I said nothing. Just touched the metal edge of the deed folder. As if it were an anchor. That is how it begins. But what they did not know was that I had already built walls stronger than concrete alerts with the county clerk. Freezes on my credit. And locks no one else could reset. They thought they could walk in and claim it. They did not see that I had prepared for this moment, since the first time they called me selfish at 14. Now, sitting on the rooftop with empty chairs and cold plates, I understood what kind of storm was forming. Would you lend your home equity to family if they skipped your housewarming? Comment, yes or no. I want to hear from you. And listen closely because the real confrontation, the one that split blood from paper, happened not under these lights, but across a dinner table where tradition met law. I should tell you how we arrived at that rooftop night. Because it did not come out of nowhere. It began in small ways. The kind you excuse at first because they wear the mask of family. My sister, Sienna, was always the golden child. Where I measured life in careful steps and late nights at the office. She measured hers in hashtags and borrowed applause. When I was 18, I worked double shifts at a bookstore and a diner, stacking every dollar toward student loans. She was 16 then. And my parents bought her a brand new car with leather seats. Because a young woman needs something safe. When I asked for help with my tuition, my father told me, a real adult stands alone. That is the balance sheet of our family. Her wants were called dreams. Mine were called debts. Years later, when I entered finance, my world became long hours and relentless calculations. I lived in a rented room with peeling paint and an unreliable radiator. I wore the same 2 suits until the fabric thinned. But I climbed. One rung at a time. By 30, I was making decisions on portfolios worth more than I could have imagined in my early 20s. Every bonus went into savings. Every tax return went toward the idea of ownership. Meanwhile, Sienna floated from project to project. First, as a boutique candle line, she never filed sales taxes. Then, but a lifestyle vlog that burned through borrowed money on cameras and trips. She called investments. My parents called her visionary. They called me too rigid. It was not just words. I had the records. Credit card payments I covered in my early career when her bills threatened to crush her. Lease co-signatures. I refused. Only to be told by my mother. Do not be a ledger with your own blood. My father once said. A man provides. Yet every time I asked what happened to the money I gave, there was only silence or laughter. The deeper I built my independence, the more they leaned. When I told them I was looking at apartments, my mother's first reply was, make sure there is a guest room. So Sienna has a base while she figures herself out. My father added. A large storage space, we will keep the family's things there. Even my sister chimed in. Your kitchen light is perfect. I can record content there. I thought those comments were small. But the week my offer was accepted, the family group chat told the truth. A message slipped through meant for someone else where my father wrote. She will sign, she always does. This penthouse will serve all of us. It was followed by Sienna's laughing emoji. They called me a walking vault. It was then I began to prepare. Not loudly. Not with speeches. But with paper. I structured the purchase through a limited liability company. I had an operating agreement drafted by a lawyer who believed in preemptive defense. I added a transfer on death clause, naming only one person outside that circle my grandmother, who had once whispered to me, keep receipts, they are the only way to stay sane. So when they skipped my housewarming, I should not have been surprised. I watched the videos of them clapping for Sienna's car and thought, of course. They did not see my rooftop as celebration, they saw it as collateral. But I was not the girl with 2 suits anymore. I was the owner of a space sealed with contracts. That night, as I cleared away untouched plates, I realized the battle had already begun. And what they did not know was that the first real strike would come not from me, but from them when they carried clipboards into my living room as if I were just another line item on their balance sheet. They came in a convoy. Like it was a raid. My father's black SUV pulled up first. My mother's sedan behind it. And Sienna trailing in her gleaming red car, with temporary tags still crooked in the back window. I watched them through the peephole before I opened the door. My father carried a clipboard under his arm. As if this visit were a meeting he had scheduled with himself. Let's get down to it, he said, brushing past me before I could even offer a greeting. My mother kissed the air near my cheek, murmuring, we'll bless the home after. Sienna lifted her phone and did a sweeping pan for her followers. My sister's penthouse, she whispered into the camera. Her tone, less proud than possessive. They did not ask about the view of the bridge or the chandelier I had chosen after weeks of research. They did not comment on the polished floors or the rows of books along the wall. Instead, my father set his clipboard on the marble counter as if it were his desk. He flipped a page covered in bullet points. First, he announced, since Sienna's insurance is outrageous, we are moving her registration here. She will park in your garage from time to time. No, I said. He blinked. Like he had not heard correctly. Excuse me. No registration at my address. I repeated. Unless the person lives here. My mother jumped in. Her voice softened with practiced warmth. She will be here all the time. She needs a stable base. It is not a big deal, Sienna added, leaning against the counter with her phone in hand. Everyone does it. It is literally harmless. It is not about crime, I said. It is about my name. My father sighed as if I were a stubborn child. You are being rigid. Let us move on. He flipped another page. Second item. We need to add me to the operating agreement of your company. For estate reasons. So, things are clean. If anything happens to you. You are my father, I replied. That does not make you my business partner. It protects you. My mother said. You do not understand how the world works. I read enough to understand. I told her. No one goes on my deed. Sienna muttered, under her breath. So selfish. We are literally family. My father's eyes narrowed. But he pressed on. Fine. Then at least refinance. Take a small equity line. Say, 2 million. We will help you manage it. Sienna needs a down payment for her flagship store. And there it was. I laughed once. Lo. The reason you skipped my housewarming. I said. You were rehearsing this speech. My sister threw up her hands. We were celebrating my car. You are being petty. This is the step that matters. My father snapped. Tapping his clipboard. Money sitting in walls is lazy. Unlock it. Her boutique will pay it back. Boutique, I said. The candles. The pop-ups. You cancel when you are tired. The brand you have renamed 3 times. That boutique. You are being negative. She shot back. This is why you do not get invited. I invited you, I said quietly. You chose a dealership instead. My mother's voice took on that sharp sweetness she reserved for manipulation, disguised as care. Listen to me. We raised you. We housed you. We fed you. Family reallocates resources to the child in the season of need. You are steady. Your sister is launching. You carry more now. Then she carries you later. I just settled here. I said. This is my stability. Be an adult. My father leaned forward. Elbows on my counter. Step up. You taught me to be an adult by charging me rent at 14. I said. I stepped up. I saved. I built this. This is not a group project. The air tightened. In our family. That was the moment to back down. To let him raise his voice. Or to let my mother cry. But I did not. Sienna's voice sliced in. You do not even use both bedrooms. I could move in. Pay you a little. How much, I asked. She blinked. Why does it matter? Money is energy. It flows. My father slapped the clipboard with his palm. Enough. Here is what is going to happen. I will call my guy. We will fix the deed. We will refinance. We will register the car. And you will host Thanksgiving. Because you have the space. No. I said. My voice was level. To all of it. My mother's eyes shimmered with practiced tears. Why are you punishing us? This is not revenge. I told her. This is closure. From a role I never agreed to play. My father pointed at me like a coach on the sidelines. Listen. You do not slam doors on blood. I am not slamming. I said. I am locking what I paid for. And for the first time in our family's long history of demands. I meant it. When they pulled away. The street fell quiet in that particular way my family taught me to fear. In our house. Silence never meant peace. Silence meant they were reloading. I stood at the window until the taillights disappeared. Then, set the kettle on and pulled the compliance folder from the bottom drawer. Paper steadies the hand. Paper does not gaslight you. Inside. Every page lived where it should. First. The operating agreement for the limited liability company that holds the penthouse. A tidy Delaware entity with a clause that says any change of members requires unanimous consent. Another clause that prohibits using the property to secure obligations for any non-resident third party, and, tucked into the exhibits, a transfer on death instruction for the membership interest. Not the deed. Naming my grandmother as beneficiary if I die. People talk about bloodlines. Lawyers talk about ownership lines. I prefer the latter. I slid the deed copy back into its sleeve. Ran a finger over the notary seal. And breathed. Then I did the boring work that keeps a life intact. I changed the smart lock code and revoked every temporary pass I had issued on move-in week. I ordered a locking mailbox. No more helpful hands bringing my mail to the kitchen island. I called my insurer. Set a verbal password. And instructed them not to accept policy changes without it. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I know my father's definition of emergency too well. Next. I enrolled the parcel in the county recorder's property fraud alert. If anyone tries to slide paper under my door through the back office, the county will ring the bell. By mid-morning the following day, the bell rang. An email from the title company pinged my inbox. Flag from county recorder: attempted recording to add a party to title rejected for lack of owner signature and proper notarization. Attached was a scan of a flimsy request bearing my parcel number and my father's name where new owner ought to be. The title assistant added, "We did not submit this." Of course. The recorder blocked it. Sharing for your awareness. County did the rejecting. Title sent the warning. The world briefly made sense. I printed the email and slid it into the folder behind a tab labeled paper trail. Receipts have a funny way of calming you down. Sienna revved up next. Over a photo of an empty storefront. She wrote, "Some people would rather watch family fail than let equity flow." Her commenters did what commenters do. Strangers told me to be generous with my extra rooms. Called me cold for locking doors I had paid to open. I put my phone face down and made a grocery list. The surest way to starve is to eat other people's opinions. That afternoon, my mother left a daisy chain of voicemails. Each one a different mask. We can fix this. If you love me, call me. We will be at your place at 7. I do not know who you are anymore. I saved them and did not respond. By evening, the kettle had gone cold twice. The quiet pressed hard against the windows. My grandmother called after her soap opera. They are angry, she said. Practical, as ever. Are you eating? I told her I had chili thawing and rolls in the oven. Put some away for later, she said. And keep your doors locked. Her love always arrives in the form of instructions. I follow them. The group chat woke up the next day with my father's favorite trick instruments dressed as reason. He dropped a screenshot from a refinance calculator and typed, "Be reasonable." Then my mother, "We have a plan. We will help with payments if you sign a family agreement that keeps the home in us." In us, like my years of saving were a temporary custodianship. I typed one sentence in return: no changes to title or membership. No loans secured by my walls. Then, because I am still human, I added the line that calmed 14-year-old me when the rules kept changing. I decide where my name goes. As for the clipboard performance they staged in my kitchen, the part where they demanded a home equity line, I corrected the math out loud. If only to myself. This is not a primary residence home equity line. This is a commercial facility secured by a building held in a company. I could feel my father's voice even in my empty kitchen. Money sitting in walls is lazy. Unlock it. My answer was simple. It is not lazy to keep the roof above your head fastened to your own signature. Just in case the words we had already traded evaporated the way family words often do. I opened the voice memo app. I had recorded their visit from the moment the elevator dinged, my father saying they would get on the limited liability company. Take $200,000 now to prime the pump. Then push for a larger refinance once I was tired of arguing. I exported the file to 2 places, a cloud folder only I can open and a small flash drive. I slipped the drive into a plain envelope, sealed it with clear tape, and wrote 3 words on the front in thick marker: play this loud. People think revenge is thunder. In truth, it is a stack of quiet decisions. My neighbor across the hall knocked around dusk to return a package that had been misdelivered. I thanked her with a lemon from the small tree by the window. Your lights looked so pretty the other night, she said. We thought you had a party. I smiled the way you do when you do not feel like explaining absence. Another time, I said. Around 9. Another email landed. This time, from the county recorder's alert system. Attempted deed change involving your parcel was declined for non-compliance. No drama. Just a door closing somewhere on paper. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The next morning, my mother tried ceremony. She sent a photo of a small oil jar on her kitchen table, and texted, "We will bless your home with this. We took your spare keys years ago." I replied with a photo of my new lock cylinder, sitting in its packaging, and wrote, "Keys changed. Blessings optional. Bet-tu. Perhaps? But precise." And then the invitations for Thanksgiving went out cousin's house. A full guest list. A promise of unity. They were moving to the larger stage, where relatives clap on cue and tradition provides cover. It would be the perfect place to declare my walls of family trust. To shame me into ink. They had the room. I had the envelope. Thanksgiving arrived with the weight of inevitability. The city was cold that week. Winds sharp enough to sting your face as you crossed the avenues. I roasted a small chicken for myself that morning. Not a turkey. And set one place at the table. But I knew the real meal would be elsewhere, at my cousin's house, where my parents had announced they would host a family gathering since I was being difficult. At 4 o'clock, I walked into that house. The room smelled of sage and roasting meat. Laughter bouncing off the walls. My father stood near the head of the table, clipboard in hand again. Though this time, the pages were tucked inside a leather folder, as if formality might cover audacity. My mother's eyes flickered the way they always did when she was preparing a performance. And Sienna, she was live on her phone, filming the long dining table, telling her followers, "This year, we're uniting as a family to secure our legacy." I knew then what was about to happen. When everyone was seated, my father cleared his throat. This home, this family, our name, these things must stay strong. That is why we are moving the penthouse into a family trust. It will protect us all. Camila has done well. But no house is truly hers alone. It belongs to the bloodline. Applause rippled weakly from a few distant relatives. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin, murmuring, "This is for protection." And then my sister stood, phone in hand. "Look," she said into the camera, pointing at me. "She will sign tonight. We are making it official." I rose slowly, steady as stone. "No," I said. "Not tonight. Not ever." A murmur ran down the table. My father's jaw tightened. "Camila, be reasonable. Sit down. We will explain." "I have heard enough explanations," I replied. I set a plain envelope on the table, sliding it across the linen until it stopped in front of him. "Inside is the recording of your last visit. You said," and I quote, "We will get on the LLC. Pull 200,000 now. Then push her to refinance the rest. She will not fight. Alvry too." My sister's smile faltered. My mother went pale. My father's hand froze on the folder. "And that," I continued, "is conspiracy. Fraud. Attempted misrepresentation of ownership. Every word is on file. Every word can be played." I looked toward the cousin who was fiddling with the television setup in the corner. He hesitated, then pressed a button. And suddenly, my father's voice filled the room. Projected across the walls, "She will not fight." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the clink of a fork sliding off a plate. My sister lowered her phone. Stream still running. Dozens of her followers were now hearing the same recording, their comments popping up in real time. "Is this real? She is scamming her own sister. Unbelievable." I turned to the room. "This is not love. This is theft dressed as tradition. And I am finished pretending." My mother reached across the table, trembling. "Camila, please. We are protecting you." "No," I said. "You are protecting your own debts and disguising them as family duty. I worked. I saved. I paid. And this home is not a family vault." My father stood, face red, voice low. "You think paper will shield you? Blood runs deeper than contracts." I held up the deed copy, the notary's stamp still dark against the page. "Blood does not sign documents." I did. Sienna slammed her phone face down on the table. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "Do you know how bad this looks, my followers? This looks exactly as it is." I cut in. "Entitlement. Recorded and exposed." The room broke apart after that. Cousins whispered. An aunt stood and walked out, muttering about shame. Someone else filmed quietly, ensuring the evidence multiplied beyond my own control. My mother gathered her shawl around her shoulders, her face pinched and small. My father shut his folder but did not meet my eyes. When they left that night, their footsteps were heavier than any storm. I stayed behind, helped clear the plates, thanked my cousin for his courage. Then I walked home alone through the city streets, lights blinking red and gold, and felt something shift inside me. For the first time, I was not the quiet background figure carrying the weight of their choices. For the first time, they carried the weight of mine. The morning after that dinner, the city seemed strangely calm. The traffic still roared, horns still blared. But inside me there was a quiet I had not felt in years. I brewed coffee and stood by the wide windows of my penthouse, watching the sun creep between skyscrapers. For the first time, I believed it when the papers on my desk whispered back, "This is yours." In the days that followed, the fallout spread faster than I could track. Sienna's followers clipped the recording from her own livestream, posting it with captions like "Family fraud and trust no one." A brand that had been planning to sponsor her pulled out within 48 hours. She posted tearful videos about misunderstandings. But the damage was done. Influence, I learned, is fragile when built on borrowed foundations. My parents did not call me directly, but messages trickled in. One was a short email from my father. 3 words. "We need reconciliation." Another from my mother. Longer, insisting that family disagreements should never be public, and begging me to fix the story so Sienna's career would survive. I left both messages unanswered. Instead, I focused on what mattered. I visited my grandmother, bringing her medicine already set to auto-ship every month. She sat at her kitchen table, folded her hands over mine, and said, "You are the only one who keeps receipts." It was her way of blessing my choice. Back home, I wrote out my own house rules on a card and taped it inside the pantry. No loans. No keys given away. No registrations. Direct help to grandma only. It looked simple on paper. But to me it was a covenant. A reminder that boundaries are not cruelty. They are survival. A week later, I decided to host a gathering after all. One of my own making. No cousins. No parents. No golden child. I invited colleagues from work. Neighbors from down the hall. A friend from college I had not seen in years. We grilled on the rooftop. Set out chairs. Told stories about jobs. About first apartments. About mistakes that turned into lessons. When someone raised a glass and said, "This place feels like you," I nearly cried. As the night ended, I sat alone for a moment under the string lights. The same lights that had hung silent the night my family stayed away. But now, they glowed above laughter that was real, not rehearsed. I thought back to my father's words. Blood runs deeper than contracts. And realized how wrong he was. Paper does not betray you. Paper holds. Paper remembers. I leaned back, breathing in the cold November air, and let the quiet settle around me. If you think I made the right choice standing against my family, comment right. If you would have handled it differently, share your idea below. Because sometimes survival is not about who you are tied to by blood, it is about the walls you build to protect the life you earned. Story 2. I'm 9-year-old Caleb. And telling me who I wasn't was my family's favorite pastime for a long time. Despite being a decent kid, you never complete tasks. As he gave the keys to his automobile to my sister Mara, my dad would say, "My aunt gave me the moniker Mr." As if I had requested it. Only while hers was in the store. I lowered my head. I saved. I worked. People outgrow tendencies. I told myself. The only person who ever talked to me as though I was already the guy I aspired to be was my grandma. Died. Knives were sharpened from the patterns. June. My grandma had a calm strength. Before giving you your birthday money, she ironed dollar notes. She put cheerful faces and dates on freezer bag labels. Although she was never wealthy, she preserved a modest nest fund from the sale of the hardware company, following my grandfather's heart attack, and owned her tiny blue cottage completely. In a world where fairness always appeared to have Mara's face on it, she represented order and justice. One summer when I was 16, I painted her fence, put new doors on the kitchen cabinets, and at the end of the week, we rebuilt the porch swing. Promise me, you'll learn what you want to learn. Not what people say is sensible, she urged, nodding at our work. I made a commitment that I didn't completely comprehend, and I watched as she tucked it away tenderly behind her eyes. Last year, when she passed away, the scent of wood polish and mint tea filled the home, reminding me of my early years. We ate nice casseroles and were black. At the dining table, Dad ruled. He appeared significant, with his lips squeezed thin in a line. He responded, "We'll keep things simple." This signified anything in our family. Everything is going to happen to Mara. How about you? Caleb will be expected to act responsibly. I wasn't expecting anything. I had no desire to fight. All I wanted to do was sit with my back to the cold plaster wall of her living room. And don't forget the woman who referred to me as my study. A mild-mannered lawyer who appeared to be trying out for the role of mild-mannered lawyer read her will. The room seemed like a stage as he cleared his throat. My aunt put her pearls in a clasp. My father sat down in a chair that seemed to increase his height, with a silent smile that stopped short of her eyes. Mara sat. There was a faint ripple of astonishment in the room when the lawyer told me that Grandma June had left the home and most of her savings to me. My own breath was too loud for me to hear. The porch swing and the way the sun striped the floor through the blinds were all I could see, while the lawyer continued to discuss percentages and minor bequests for the grandchildren. After finding my shoulder and squeezing it, Dad burst out laughing. One sound. Nothing. Caleb. That's surprising. He responded cautiously. Mara looked at me as if I was the one wearing the incorrect costume and the lights had suddenly turned on. My aunt bent over. June really appreciated your handyman work. As though her use of the word love may taint my grandmother's choice in the past. She trilled. The subsequent events resembled a magician's trick in which the left hand appears to be working while the right hand is actually being watched. It began with brief discussions. Dad gave a call. Son. We have to calculate out taxes. Bill. You don't want a surprise. Mara sent an SMS. Well done. Come on over. Let's discuss creating a remodeling plan. To be sure we understood. The attorney asked us to come back for a follow-up. All of a sudden, there were paperwork to expedite the probate process. And each page had a gentle assurance that I had not yet fully comprehended. However, they did. You can take over once we handle it for a bit. Dad replied. With a reassuring grin. As he slid a stack across the table. It is preferable to have only one point of contact until everything is resolved. I wish I could tell that I was completely safeguarded and read every page like a hawk. I wish I could claim that I had the knowledge and the spine I do today. I took a quick look. My inquiries were met with nods and technical terms. It's normal. The attorney added. It simply makes it possible for the estate to be managed efficiently. Dad used a pen to tap a line. Click here to sign. It's only procedural. Though. 2 weeks later. While I was at work. Mara shared a picture of herself clutching a key in front of Grandma's blue house with the message. New chapter. I felt nauseous. I pulled up. Your heart is racing in that panting manner that gives you the impression that you've been jogging even if you haven't done anything. There was a change in the curtains. In the driveway was a brand new SUV. My key didn't fit when I used it. When she answered the door. Caleb, Mara remarked. Her voice dripping with fake worry. Dad. Did you not explain? To make things simpler? We changed the title. For the time being. It's in my name, so we may refinance for major repairs. You don't feel angry. Do you? I glanced beyond her into the hallway. Where a cross-stitch frame that Grandma had created was now momentarily hanging crooked. I said it again. She said. Don't make this a thing. Like a sticker. The smile remained attached. You've always acted impulsively. You'd panic. Dad remarked. When it's all updated and worth more. You'll be grateful to us. In any case. You wouldn't have known what to do with it. That sentence. With it. You wouldn't have known what to do. Stuck itself in a tiny, jagged spot inside of me. I gave the attorney a call. He was all excuses and no answers. This construction was requested by your father. The authorization was signed by you. For efficiency. Mara has been appointed as the executor. As though I had been the sluggish component that needed to be gotten around. The term efficiency kept popping up. I told Dad about it. And he didn't even seem embarrassed. He turned back to a game on the television and added. Caleb. You would have wasted it. You become bored after purchasing devices. Mara has a strategy. We're your family. Nonetheless. The pocket is the same. I responded. I didn't give you my pocket. He didn't answer. As if it were some draft he could drown out. He just cranked up the volume a bit. That day. Something inside of me shattered and set. Like a tree scar that envelops a wound and keeps it there permanently. Rather than a bone that has broken in a cast. I no longer attended family dinners. I ceased answering calls. 6 months later. The house sold for more than I could have ever dreamed. Mara sent a picture of a glass of champagne in a kitchen I had never been in. I'm proud of you. Kiddo. Said Dad. Turning Grandma's legacy into a reality. With a cardboard box full of my grandmother's belongings that they hadn't bothered to claim since they weren't valuable. I sat on the floor of my one-bedroom apartment. Pot holders made using crochet and a button jar. Caleb's favorite recipe was written on the top of a folded recipe card. And I made the decision that I was done begging to sit at tables where chairs are pulled out from beneath me. I had a job. It was messy and unattractive at first. I accepted contract work. Handyman services. Indeed. However, I also studied the fundamentals of electrical work. How to fix tiny engines. And then made a strange turn toward mobile systems. I met a man at work who was making a camper out of a delivery vehicle. He also wanted someone who could figure out how to integrate 20 feet of metal into a complete existence. I adored it. It was like using my two hands to adjust the universe to scale. After one van turned into two, a tiny business that specialized in larger projects was recommended. In the nights, I watched movies about diesel heaters, marine-grade wiring, and battery management systems. I discovered a method for turning a bed into a ceiling lift. I vividly remember how satisfying it was to fit a bespoke drawer so tightly that it closed with a quiet sound. When you decide that your life is yours, you receive a new type of silence. But it's not bitter. Sometimes, bitterness knocks and begs to be allowed in. It's straightforward. I kept every spare penny. At the store, I took baths and ate sandwiches by the river. I wrote down all the things I didn't know, and I eventually learnt them one by one. I made several mistakes that no one noticed. The bills became cleaner. Instead of only allowing me to do installs, the business began allowing me to spec projects. We designed and shed happy tears as a client took up a rig for the first time. I had to act as though my eye was covered with dust. It's amusing how a path might wind toward an object you weren't even aware you were looking for. I wanted to make something for myself, more and more, as I built. To stand in, rather than to flee. If I had the opportunity. I began drawing out what my house on wheels might look like. It was a rolling lesson plan for all I learnt. Not a vehicle or a simple camper. The sort of device that reduces the size of a map. I kept it to myself. I recently included a line item in my budget. The future. When he saw it, the store owner chuckled. The future. Using a pen to tap the spreadsheet. He said, dream. Large heart. The store secured 3 significant contracts last winter. The sort of tasks that sustain operations for a year. You've earned a piece of this, the owner stated as he pulled me into his office and shut the door. It was evidence that the universe occasionally shook your hand back when you stretched out. But it wasn't a windfall. To be honest, I saw a listing that I had been eyeing for months after taking my percent and adding it to future. An excellent diesel pusher. Minimal distances. Well maintained. Like a deer. Price. It was the sort of setup that only exists in the fantasies of the roadway. Like the type found only in glossy brochures. 3 times. I ran the numbers. It was ridiculous. Additionally, I wanted to pass the test exactly. I purchased it. The true nature of an RV like that is not understood by those who do not live on wheels. It's more than just a bed and living space with an engine attached. It's a system cathedral. Watertight chambers, shaped like puzzles. Hydraulic levelers that balance a house on the side of a mountain. Solar panels that absorb sunlight and whisper it into batteries. And inverters that convert stored light into hot baths and coffee. The fact you can sit at the table and listen to the rain on your own roof is a better indicator of the space's size than its square footage. No? You could take a morning trip to the coast. In ways that would not be apparent to someone who believes that a home equates to a foundation. I spent a month making it uniquely my. In keeping with my childhood tradition of naming bikes and skateboards, I gave it a modest name. I rerouted the fresh water pipes to prevent freezing. Replaced the batteries. Adjusted the ride's tuning. Sanded off a little blemish. And clear-coated it till it resembled a mirror. I sewed a little patch onto the sofa pillow's back. Grandma used to draw a happy face in yellow thread next to dates. I kept it to myself. Then, in late spring, my cousin sent me a picture of a big picnic table lit by string lights with the remark, "Family get-together next month." It seemed like you were accidentally caught in an email. According to Mara, I spent a lot of time looking at the screen. I wanted to decline out of habit. But I had resistance. Instead, a more recent muscle flexed. I murmured aloud, "Okay," as I peered out at the river, which was sparkling like a pocket knife. Beyond the windshield of my parked truck, the day of the event was warm and windy, constantly shifting the aroma of barbecue and freshly cut grass. The location was a leased pavilion next to the former fairgrounds. The type of spot where picnic tables were painted, and there was a blackboard sign with hearts surrounding dates. Adults gathered in circles that resembled parentheses as children pursued a squeaking soccer ball. Wearing a summer outfit that exuded easy style, Mara stood close to the coolers. Dad donned his salmon-colored polo shirt, which he saves for occasions when he thinks someone might ask him for guidance. Before they noticed what I had drove, they saw me. Every tail light appeared to be an afterthought as I parked along the road behind a row of automobiles that were so high and square. There was a brief silence after I left. The sound of ancient tales colliding with fresh information. Mara was the first to recover. She smiled, only the upper half of her face showing, and said, "Caleb, you succeeded." I said, "I did." My voice sounded firm, as if I had mastered self-sufficiency. Dad gave me a shoulder clap, a reverberation of old behaviors. He responded, "Good to see you, son. You look good." I watched their looks. A 45-foot motorhome is difficult to overlook. Like something that had fallen from a procession. It rested there in the sunlight, shining paint. A few adolescents had already approached there and were using the reflection to take pictures. My aunt used her hand to shield her eyes. "Is that right? Was that something you rented for the day?" Not out of malice, but because sometimes the best response is to be silent. I left the question hanging. I felt the weight of the rig shifting the afternoon's orbit as I strode back toward it. Gaze in humped. Conversation trailed after me. Stuttering. Someone gave a low whistle. That's what people do when they're scared of their opinions on a deadline. So someone laughed. "You own that." Dad squinted as he finally caught up to the parking lot's glare. "What is this?" "Caleb, a mobile home," I said. "Life at work. A pledge I made some time ago." "You purchased a bus." Mara spoke a bit too loudly, as if she wanted to occupy the room before anybody else did. "When did you do it?" "The lottery." "This is absurd. You can't even operate such a vehicle." I gave a little smile. "I can. It turns out." "What do you want to demonstrate?" Her remarks accelerated as she pressed. "Your motions are usually excessive. You could have been given a regular position." "Do you believe that purchasing a massive device entails responsibility?" "Being responsible isn't something you buy," I said. "It's a method of transporting objects." Dad folded his arms. "This has nothing to do with the house," I said. And I discovered for the first time that it was somewhat accurate. The match had been in the house. I had meticulously arranged this firewood day after day until I understood exactly how it would burn. Now everyone was watching. Uncles, aunts, cousins, and even the children slowed down and left the field as though dragged by an invisible sea. When I pressed the key fob, the coach lights calmly blinked. "Hi there," when I unlocked the door. It hissed. A breath-like release of air. My hands remained steady. You can sense the geometry of your life, at times when it resembles a set of lines that are convergent. The intersection of what you've created and what people thought of you. "How about we have a look?" The terms I used were straightforward. However, Mara's expression changed from one of amusement to one of more calculatedness. She looked at her father, and they both took a step forward. They were more inquisitive than skeptical. The entire family seemed to be leaning in. People were murmuring as if the questions were in the air. Pulling the doorknob. I reached up and opened my home's door. There was a gentle hydraulic thrum as the steps folded down. The scent of coffee and cedar wafted out in cool air. A familiar voice, clear and difficult to ignore, moved inside, along with a form. From the top of the steps. It floated down. "Hi everyone. It has been a while." Time was drawn tight like a drawstring by the voice that emerged from inside my gear. I recognized the voice, the same way you do. A tune you heard on Sunday mornings growing up, but can't recall learning. Mara stumbled. The way Dad tilts his chin while he's debating whether to chastise or grin. When the door quit hissing, I moved aside. Then she appeared at the top of the steps. "Since high school, Evelyn Hart has been my grandmother's best friend. When my father placed me on a sugar-free diet when I was a child, the woman who taught me how to fold fitted sheets once snuck ginger biscuits to me. She appeared both shorter than I had recalled and taller all at once. Her gray hair was nestled in an untidy twist, like a crown she had forgotten she was wearing. And her back was straight. My Aunt Evelyn found her pearls instinctively as she inhaled fingers. "Hi, Lily." Evelyn spoke kindly. Her eyes moved with the steady, methodical tenderness she's always possessed. "Richard." She gave my dad a nod. "Mara." I noticed the slightest hesitation as she mentioned my sister's name. Like a musical rest that makes the next note fall more forcefully. Mara was the first to recover. "How beautiful," I said. she said. That too glossy grin. It has been a long time. How unexpected. Evelyn returned the grin. A closed book smile that showed no teeth. She continued. Caleb invited me. Looked at me. And something settled in my chest. I had the impression that someone was touching my shoulder from the inside. From Evelyn. Dad's gaze shifted to the rig and back again. That's how he laughed. When people want the story to heal. They do. Would you have a look at it? Then he spoke too loudly. Our Caleb went out and purchased a tour bus and performed. Son. What comes next? A table and tickets. I remained silent. I just raised my hand in the direction of the open door. Even without stepping on the first gaze. You're coming in. Curiosity was pulling one way. And pride was pushing the other. And I could already feel the tug of battle getting stronger. I lost my pride. The order in which they queued up behind me resembled a family dynamics diagram. My aunt hovered behind me like a graceful shadow. Cousins peered over my hips with eager eyes. And Dad, just behind my shoulder, appeared to be leading Mara next and attempting to surge ahead. Their red cheeks were cooled by the air within. As they surveyed the cedar-lined doorway, I saw their faces shift. The living space, which seemed more like a purposefully designed little home than a car, had a warm glow from the recessed lighting. The wooden table, with dovetail joints and the couch, with sunshine. The little plant in the corner window had managed to survive my learning curve. It has the scent of June's pantry. With a palm over her chest, my aunt blurted. I had used her sachets to line one sketch. The air apparently remembered. 2. Mara's gaze swept surfaces like a cat looking for dust. Nice, she remarked. Last but not least, a concession was given out like a parking ticket. Dad turned slowly. Landing on the circuit's touchscreen on the control panel, the type of arrangement you learn by doing type. He narrowed his eyes at it. Why do you require all of this? After asking, he gave his own response. Too intricate. Caleb. You always do this. Everything you do becomes a project. Skills come from projects. I remarked. Skills become decisions I didn't make. Some individuals would rather have their decisions made for them. As though it were her living room. Evelyn walked slowly to the end of the couch. This, if I'm being truthful, was caused by our family's ancient physics. She gave the cushion next to her a pat. She said, sit. Honey. And I did. She grabbed the little bag at her feet. A yellow smiley face on a square of dark blue canvas with tattered straps and a patch sewn in the corner. She winked when she saw my expression. I discovered this in my closet. I figured I'd put it back where it belongs. I sensed a braiding of the past and present. Every grin in my grandmother's needlework had a towel and an additional thread that resembled a dimple. I felt the dimple when I ran my hand across it. As if you can sense your own heartbeat. A living creature because you do. Posing like a magazine ad for dismissal. Mara leaned against the adjacent cabinet with her arms folded. Well, she answered. Elaborating. Is there a reason you planned this spectacular arrival with June's former neighbor as your surprise guest closest friend? Or are we on a tour? Without glancing at her, Evelyn corrected softly. Indeed. There is a cause. Dad exhaled through his nostrils. And he stopped himself. 2. He was attempting to determine if he would appear to be the villain, if he appeared irritated. Whatever it is. He added. Palms raised. Say it straight. Evelyn didn't rush. She lifted a slim wooden box out of the bag. The wood. The color of warm honey. The edges worn smooth from fingers that had touched it 100 times on the lid. In careful black marker. My grandmother's handwriting for later. When they've all settled down. If my heart had been a glass on a table. Someone had just tapped the rim with a spoon. The whole room hummed. I knew that handwriting down to the tilt of the J. Dad did too. I watched his face pull tight. Mara tilted her head the way she used to when she was deciding which angle made her look right in photos. What is that? Dad asked. Voice gone flat. June gave it to me the week before she died. Evelyn said. Fingertips resting lightly on the box as if it might jump. She said, Evie. I love my kids. But they will turn my will into a committee meeting if given half a chance. Wait. Then give this to Caleb when the time is right. He'll know. She looked at me. She said you'd know. Dad's laugh came out wrong. Oh, come on. We respected June's wishes to the letter. Did you? Evelyn asked. Still gentle. But with a question in it that had a spine. I may be old, Richard. But I'm not foggy. Mara stepped forward. Palms out. In a performance of reason, we did what was necessary to manage the property. Caleb signed documents. We communicated. Don't make this into some melodrama. I looked at her and felt the old heat rise. That flare that used to make my throat tight and my words scattered. It didn't come this time. Somewhere in the long hours of wiring, the heat had cooled into clarity. You told me I wouldn't know what to do with it. I said. Then you made sure I couldn't. You would have mishandled it. Mara snapped before she could help herself. Then, catching the sound of her own voice, she softened it. You were overwhelmed. We helped. I asked you to stop. I said. Dad rapped his knuckles lightly on the table, as if calling a meeting to order. This is pointless, it declared, looking at Evelyn's box like it was a firecracker. June is gone. What's done is done. We've all moved on. Evelyn's eyes didn't blink. Speak for yourself, she said. And for a breath, the room belonged to her again in the way kitchens used to when she and June were in them. Drinking tea and deciding how to fix things that men had complicated. Open it, my cousin whispered from the doorway, and then clapped a hand over her mouth like she wasn't meant to have said anything. I slid my finger under the lid and felt the tiny catch. The lock was nothing fancy. Just a little latch twisted sideways. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to know, but because I did. The version of me from a year ago would have opened it like a kid at a gift. He felt guilty about the version of me who had rewired a battery bank twice. Because I didn't like the sound of the inverter fan. Opened the latch and lifted the lid with care inside. Nestled in tissue paper that had gone soft with handling, lay two things: a flat gray USB drive with a label on masking tape that said, "Play me together," and a sealed envelope, addressed in that same careful hand to my steady. I didn't touch either for a full breath. Something pressed behind my ribs. Big and tender. I looked up. And for once, everyone waited. No one spoke. The rig hummed quietly around us. The air conditioner, a low, attentive sigh. Let's see what she wanted, I said. And even Mara didn't argue with the grammar of that. I slid the USB into the media port under the television. The screen woke up a black mirror into which they all leaned. For a second, I saw reflected there a whole family, arranged by habit and hurt in a space that didn't know their rules yet. I selected the only file on the drive. A video labeled simply, "Hello? Caleb. Dad," said his voice. Careful now. Like a man negotiating with a dog he isn't sure will bite. If this is a private note, maybe we should. It says play me together, I said. Together means together. Evelyn's head tilted like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. She was very clear about that part. She murmured. The screen flickered from black to light and then resolved into my grandmother's face. Not the fragile face from the last week, but the June who taught me how to fix a hinge with 3 different screws. Because the door needs to remember how to behave. Eyes' bright hair set the hint of a smile that meant she'd rehearsed and then decided to just tell the truth. She was sitting at her kitchen table. The one with the burn mark. From the time I set a hot pan down without thinking. A mug sat in front of her with a teabag tag heavy on the rim. There was a little hum on the audio. The sound of the fridge motor I had replaced for her on a Saturday, when I should have been studying for an exam. "Hello, my loves," she said. Voice filling the room of my home. And for a second, the whole of my life. If you're watching this, you've done some things I predicted, and I hope some I didn't. Forgive me for being direct. We've always been a family that praised manners when we should have practiced honesty. Dad looked as if someone had reached up and adjusted the brightness on his face. Maura lowered herself into the accent chair like the legs had gone uncertain under her. My aunt pressed her lips together, the way she does when she's keeping grief from spilling out beneath her lipstick. June went on. I made some choices with my will. Not to punish, but to correct a tilt I've watched for many years. I gave the house to Caleb because he listens to what he hears. Where the squeak comes from. And why. That kind of listening translates to people. Even if your father has sometimes preferred to call it something else. Dad's name was there without being said. And you could feel him flinch at its outline. He tried on a small smile. Took it off. Richard. She said. Then. Using his name out loud, like a held hand, and a smack all at once. You are a good man who has mistaken decisiveness for wisdom. It has served you at work. At home. It has made you confusing to love. It was as if the temperature inside the rig changed by a single precise degree. The cousins were still now, breath caught in the webbing of the moment outside. Life went on. Kids shouted near the field. Someone cracked a soda. But in here the world had tucked in to listen. June took a sip of tea and continued. Mara. My brilliant magpie. You collect shiny things. Achievements. Applause. Rooms. I respect your hustle. But hustling your brother is not the same as building a life. There is a difference between strategy and theft. I'm guessing you had help reading this. Dumb. Mara made a small sound. Half laugh. Half breath. This is. She started and then stopped because even she couldn't finish the sentence without stepping into a room where the floor had been removed. June's eyes softened and I realized she wasn't performing this for the camera. She was talking to us like we were already interrupting with our objections. I'm not here to argue with the past. She said. I'm here to tuck a few things into the future in the envelope. My study. You'll find some instructions and a key. There are copies of papers. 2. I made them because I didn't trust paperwork to protect the spirit of what is right. My fingers hovered near the sealed envelope like a compass over north. I heard Dad swallow the paper, made a dry, whispering sound. When I shifted it slightly in the box. The sound of a match that hasn't struck yet. June leaned closer to the camera. I have always believed in two kinds of belonging. The kind you inherit and the kind you built. The first can be taken from you by the greedy or the scared. The second can be given away only by you. If you are watching this together, then perhaps there's still a chance to practice. The second. Silence layered itself over the room. The video ticked on. June glanced off camera as if she had written notes on the back of an envelope and taped them to the wall. As for my house, she said. And my lungs tightened. If someone has sold it for ease or profit, you'll find in the envelope something that needs doing. It will be inconvenient. It will also be right. Then she smiled. The smile she saved for hard truths. And if you have not, well, you may ignore me on this one occasion. And make yourselves a sandwich. Mara sat forward. Eyes bright. With a kind of impatience that might have been fear in a different color palette. This is manipulative. She said. Her pitch rising slightly. She's gone. She can't dictate what we do from beyond. Evelyn said. Not unkindly. But with the authority of someone who has nursed you through a fever. Let her finish. June took a breath that I could feel all the way in my hands. One last thing. She said. Softer now. Shame makes people do silly, small-hearted things. So does pride. If you've made a mess, make it clean. If you've been robbed, don't become a thief in your own heart by living forever in that moment. Build something new. Caleb. Open the envelope when you're ready. Not before ready is when your shoulders are not trying to reach your ears. The screen froze on her smile. The one that crinkled her eyes into commas, and then faded to black for a second. The only sounds were the humming systems I had installed quietly doing what they were designed to do. Hold, cool power. Wait. Dad cleared his throat. It came out too loud. He tried again. So, he said, reaching for bluster, and coming up with a handful of air. A touching video. Old people and their messages. He clapped his hands softly. Like at a recital. Now we've all had our moment. Let's not dig up old. I'm opening it, I said. My voice steady and low. My fingers found the envelope's edge the paper gave under the pressure with a sigh. Mara took a step toward me. Palm lifted like a traffic cop. Caleb. Don't be dramatic. Whatever she put in there is. It's sentimental. It'll just make you spiral back into the past. We don't need more theatrics. I need the truth. I said, you can step outside if it makes you uncomfortable. Dad's mouth tightened. Don't you dare talk to your sister. Like someone who stole from me. I asked. And the room? Already small. seemed to press in everyone's eyes, darting like minnows. I wasn't shouting. I didn't need to. It felt like when you finally get a bolt loose and realize all you had to do was apply the right pressure in the right direction. I slid my finger under the flap and lifted. Inside were several thin sheaves of paper. Carefully clipped copies of the original will pages concerning the house. A handwritten addendum June had apparently discussed with another attorney. One who had stamped it, received, but for some reason never filed in an index card with a list of dates and names. At the bottom of the stack was a small brass key taped to a square of cardboard. The cardboard had a single word written on it in marker. Pantry. Lily. My aunt let out a noise that might have been a gasp or a laugh. Oh. June. She whispered. Half an hour. Half in resignation. Of course. Evelyn nodded slowly. Eyes glistening. She always hid important things in unimportant places. She said. Told me once if I ever go missing. Check behind the cinnamon. Mara's color rose high on her cheeks. This is absurd. The house is sold. There is no pantry. What do you think you're going to do, Caleb? Break into a stranger's kitchen and look behind her spices. We handled what needed handling. You need to stop trying to. She broke off because I had pulled free. Another paperclip to the back. A letter addressed to a name I didn't recognize. The current owner of the blue house with a note in June's handwriting. If this ever finds you, please call my grandson. It included a number. Not my old number. The number of the shop. Landline. Evelyn must have given it to her. Written beneath in Evelyn's looping script. We spoke. Dear. She is kind. A hump started up in my veins like a generator coming online. The dates on the index card were more recent than I expected. Evelyn's 2 neat checkmarks next to the word copy told me she'd already tried to secure something that used to be mine in a way that wasn't about taking anything back, but about making something whole. Dad's voice found steel. Caleb. He said, pointing a finger at the papers as if they were misbehaving children. Whatever tricks June left for you to play were sentimental at best and meddling at worst. The estate was settled. We did nothing wrong. If you try to reopen, I'm not reopening a case. I said, surprising myself with how firm it sounded. I'm opening a door. Marta laughed. The sound brittle enough to break with a key to a pantry that no longer exists. Listen to yourself. Evelyn stood. Not tall, but somehow towering. Mara. She said softly. Sometimes when people say no longer exists, what they mean is no longer under my control. Those are different. There was a rustle near the doorway. 2 of my cousins had slipped inside fully. Now. Their shoulders pressed together. Eyes bright like they were front row at a story. They'd waited to hear their whole lives outside. I could see through the windshield a handful of relatives hovering near the line of cars. Trying to be casual, while very much not being casual at all. I looked down at the papers again. And then back up at the faces I knew better than my own. When I closed my eyes. Dad. With his jaw set to stubborn Mara with her eyebrows arched to forward. My aunt with her chin tilted back to keep tears from falling. I felt as clearly as I have ever felt anything. The weight of the next choice. Not just for me, but for the room. There are moments when a family story is a piece of wood on a workbench. Grain running one way. The temptation to cut across it because you're tired, or mad, or both. And then there's the other way. The one that requires sharp tools and patience, and leaves you with something that can hold weight. I slid the brass key into my pocket. It was warm now from my hand. I picked up the phone mounted by the panel. Dialed the number on the letter. With the kind of care you use when you're fixing something delicate, and pressed the speaker button so the room could hear the line begin to ring. Mara's head snapped up. Caleb. Don't. She started. Her voice pitched with an urgency I hadn't heard since we were kids. And she was the one afraid of thunder. The line clicked. A woman's voice answered. Bright. Wary. Hello. I swallowed, my mouth dry as paper. Hi. I said. Hearing my own voice carry through my home and into whatever room she was in. My name is Caleb Hart. This may sound strange, but I believe you live in a blue house that used to belong to my grandmother. Joan. She may have left something behind for me in your pantry. There was a pause. The kind fall of 100 little calculations on the other end of the line in the rig. Everyone leaned forward without meaning to. I could hear the distant echo of a television. Wherever she was. The clatter of a spoon set gently on a saucer. A dog shaking its collar. Yes. The woman said finally. In a tone that made the hair on my arms lift. I was told you might call one day. I think I know exactly what you're talking about. Every eye in the room swung to me. Dad's hand tightened on the edge of the table. Mara's fingers trembled where they rested on the cabinet. A tiny vibration. No one else would have noticed if they weren't used to reading earthquakes in her manicure. Could I come by? I asked. Feeling each word land like a nail set properly with a few people who need to see it. Another pause. Then I'll put the kettle on. She said. But you should know when I found it. I didn't open it. The note on it said for Caleb when he is ready. It's heavy. She hesitated. Heavier than it looks. The call ended with a promise to text an address. The room remained in that suspended place. Air thick, with all the unsaid things. Swarming like midges at dusk. I set the receiver back in its cradle. Each click very loud. No one moved. My grandmother's envelope lay open on the table. Its edges soft. Its contents a small gravity well. Mara opened her mouth. Closed it. Then forced out a laugh that didn't make it to her eyes. So what she said. Pushing the words like a cart with a bum wheel. We all pile into your house bus and go on a field trip to shake a stranger's spice rack. This is ridiculous. Evelyn looked at her kindly in the way that can feel like a spotlight. Sometimes. She said. The ridiculous thing is the only honest thing left. Dad finally found a piece of ground. Over my dead body. He muttered. Low and sharp. I stood. Feeling the engine I had rebuilt beneath my feet like a sleeping thing. Ready to wake. I looked at all of them. And for once didn't try to guess their reactions before they had them. I'm going. I said. And then I looked at my aunt. At my cousins. Hovering like question marks at Mara. Whose certainty was suddenly a costume with the zipper stuck at my father. Who had built himself whole out of being unquestioned. You can come. I added. And it wasn't an invitation so much as a door propped open. And as the first foot lifted toward the threshold. Whose I couldn't yet tell. The rig's door. Steel iron. Caught a gust and swung wider with a soft thud outside. A cluster of relatives had gathered their faces. A collage of shock. Curiosity and something else I recognized far too late. Because stepping out from behind them. Eyes sharp and lips pressed into that familiar line that always meant trouble was about to be packaged. As logic was the one person I hadn't expected to show up at all after years of silence. Hello. Caleb. My mother said from the sunlight. Her voice smooth as the back of a spoon. I hear we're going on a little drive. My mother's arrival sucked the air right out of the rig. She hadn't spoken to me since the whistle-reading debacle years ago. The day she'd stood silently behind Dad and Mara, while they shuffled papers under the excuse of efficiency. Back then, her silence felt like betrayal. Painted in soft pastels. Now, as she stepped closer with that deliberate calm she always wore in arguments, it looked like a mask stretched too thin. Of course. She shows up now. I thought. Pulse drumming in my ears. When the truth is about to break open. Mom. I said carefully. Why are you here? To support my family. She answered smoothly. Eyes darting toward Mara. I heard you were making a spectacle. I thought you could use a steady voice to bring reason back into this reason. That was her word for everything. She didn't want to confront reason. When I asked why Mara's mistakes were forgiven. But mine were magnified. Reason when I begged for her to stand beside me at the lawyer's office, and she stayed seated. Reason when she told me. Your sister just knows how to handle things better. But here's the thing about reason. Once you've built your own foundation, their version of it doesn't stick anymore. He didn't answer her. Instead, I turned the key in my pocket over once. Twice. Letting its weight remind me that what came next wasn't about her comfort. It was about my grandmother's truth. Finally standing in the light. I'm going. I repeated. This time louder. So the cousins at the door could hear. Anyone who wants to see what June left for me is welcome. The rest can stay behind for a moment. No one moved. Dad's arms were crossed. Jaw clenched. Mara's eyes flickered. Trying to calculate which mask to wear. My mother's face tightened just slightly at the edges. A crack in her porcelain calm. Then Lily. My aunt. The one who had looked half in tears when June's video played. Step forward. I'll go. She said softly. June was my sister. If she left something behind, I want to see it. That broke the dam. Two cousins shuffled in behind her, whispering. We're coming too. Evelyn stood, put her hand on my arm and nodded like she'd been waiting for this turn in the story. Mara sputtered. You can't all just run after him like children chasing a scavenger hunt. This is nonsense. A pantry key. A letter. It's sentimental garbage. Grandma. Love stories. She probably wanted you to play Detective Caleb. Don't you see? She set you up to waste your time. Maybe. I said. But it's mine to waste. Her face hardened. But her words faltered. We loaded into the rig, a strange caravan of relatives, sitting stiffly on the couch and dinette. As if they weren't sure whether to treat it like a living room or a stage. Dad refused to sit standing near the door like a guard mom perched beside Mara. Her hand resting lightly on her daughter's wrist like an anchor. Evelyn sat beside me in the co-pilot's seat. Eyes out the windshield. The drive wasn't long. But the silence was thick. Every bump in the road rattled. Unspoken, thoughts loose. I kept both hands steady on the wheel. For once I wasn't nervous about whether they approved of me. I was just getting us where we needed to go. When we pulled up there, it was Grandma's blue house. Painted a lighter shade now. Curtains changed. But still standing with its quiet dignity. The new owner. A woman in her 40s with kind eyes. Stood on the porch, holding a mug of tea, as if she'd been waiting. You must be Caleb. She said when I approached. I'm Nora. Come in. The family spilled out behind me, a mismatched trail of suspicion and curiosity. Inside. The house looked different. Modern furniture. New appliances. But the bones were still there. My chest tightened when I saw the spot where the porch swing used to hang. Nora led us straight to the kitchen. When I moved in, I found a board in the pantry that looked out of place. She said. Opening the narrow door behind it. There was a small safe. The note taped to it said only one person should open it. Caleb Hart. So I left it alone until today. My hand shook slightly as I slid the brass key into the lock. It turned smoothly. Like it had been waiting years for this moment. The safe door clicked open and inside sat another wooden box. This one larger. Heavier. Taped across the top. Was a final note in Grandma's hand. Caleb. This belongs to you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I lifted it out carefully and placed it on the counter. Everyone leaned closer. I opened the lid. Inside were 3 neat bundles of cash. A stack of savings bonds. And a folder thick with documents. On top was a letter. I unfolded it. My study it began. By now you know how your father and sister operate. I didn't hide this because I didn't trust you. I hid it because I didn't trust them. This is the remainder of my savings. The part 1 refused to let slip through the cracks of paperwork. It is yours. Not for houses or cars. But for freedom. Build something that cannot be stolen. Your own life. And when you feel the urge to doubt yourself, remember this. Of all my grandchildren, you are the one who listens. Listening is rarer than people think. Never stop. The words blurred through my tears. But the room had gone utterly silent. Dad's face had drained of color. She concealed assets. He muttered. As if trying to reframe the discovery into legal jargon that made it less human. She protected them. Evelyn corrected. Her voice sharp. For once. She knew exactly what she was doing. Mara stepped forward. Her eyes darting to the bundles of cash. Caleb. Be reasonable. She said. Her voice low and urgent. This should be split. It was meant for the family. For all of us. You don't want to cause more division. Do you? I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the folder. No. I said. I want to end the division. And that means honoring what Grandma actually wanted. Now, what you say she would have wanted. Mom finally spoke. Her voice brittle. Don't do this. Caleb. You'll regret making us enemy. I turned to her. Feeling years of swallowed words rise in my throat. You made that choice the day you stood silent while they took what wasn't theirs. I don't need enemies. Mom, I need honesty. And for once in this family, I have it. The room held its breath. Dad opened his mouth. Then shut it again. Mara's hands clenched. Her mask slipping to reveal a flash of raw anger. But around us, cousins nodded. My aunt dabbed at her eyes, and Evelyn smiled softly. The kind of smile that says she'd be proud. I closed the safe. Locked it again. And pocketed the key. Not because I didn't trust Nora. But because I knew I'd earned this moment when we walked out of the house. The sunlight felt different. Like it had been filtered through the truth. I climbed back into my rig. The folder tucked safely under my arm. The others followed. Quieter now. Each of them rearranging the story they'd told themselves for years before I started the engine. I looked back at them. This isn't about money, I said. It never was. It's about respect. And I'm done asking for it. From now on, you either give it freely or you don't get me at all. No one argued for once. They just listened. I turned the key and the engine purred to life. As we pulled away from the blue house, I caught a glimpse of Mara in the rearview mirror. Her face pale. Her lips pressed thin. Dad stared out the window. Silent. My mother sat rigid. Her fingers twisting the hem of her blouse in me. I felt lighter than I had in years because Grandma had been right. Listening is rare. And I had finally listened. Not to them. But to her and to myself. That was the day I stopped being the family's afterthought. That was the day the whispers turned into silence, and the silence finally belonged to me. And as my $750, 000 home on wheels carried us down the road, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: no one would ever steal my inheritance again.